Tonight, from the Great Pyramids of Egypt, stunning answers to ancient questions as we enter hidden chambers to solve the mysteries of the pyramids. Beyond a mysterious stone, beneath the massive lid of a lost tomb, our cameras will be there, revealing secrets unseen for thousands of years. First, an ancient cemetery in the shadow of the pyramids, and a tomb unlike any other. Inside, the oldest sealed coffin ever found in Egypt, its secrets still locked in stone. This is no ordinary find. It's the tomb of a man who was an overseer when they built the pyramids, a top foreman on one of the biggest construction jobs in the history of man. What's inside? Is there a mummy or treasure for the afterlife? Maybe clues to how the pyramids were built? We'll find out when we open it and solve the mystery of the overseer's tomb. Next, one of the most baffling mysteries of all. Who built the pyramids? How could such an early civilization build these magnificent structures? New evidence will surprise you and change the way you see the pyramids forever. And finally, deep inside the Great Pyramid, the biggest mystery of all, a secret shaft unexplored. Will it lead to a chamber? And what might we find? A secret door? Maybe even clues to the treasures of a pharaoh whose body has never been found. Tonight, a custom-built robot searches for the answer and solves the mystery of the secret shaft. You've seen pyramid shows before, but you've never seen one like this.
Hello and welcome to the Great Pyramids of Egypt. I'm Laura Greene and I'm here on the Giza Plateau, just a few miles west of the city of Cairo. Now behind me you can see one of the best known sites in the whole world. It's the Great Pyramid of Khufu. It's a tomb so loaded with mystery that people have been trying to figure it out for thousands of years. Well, tonight we're going to explore those mysteries in ways no one has ever tried before. Now, in a moment, I'll be going over there inside the pyramid to join up with a team of archaeologists who are busy exploring a mysterious shaft inside one of the chambers. We already know that this shaft is blocked by what appears to be a stone door. Tonight, we're going to use a custom-built robot to try and see beyond that stone door and figure out what's on the other side. Before I go in, though, let's introduce you to my co-host, Jay Schadler, who's at another site here on the Giza Plateau, about a mile away from me now.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jay Schadler. It is a spectacular sight, isn't it? Night in particular seems to bring out the magic and the power of this place. I want to begin tonight by giving you a lay of the land. I'm about a mile south of the Great Pyramid, about a mile and a half west of the Nile, which is out into the darkness over there. West, symbolically, was very important for the ancient Egyptians. They believed that when the sun set in the west, it began a nightly journey through the land of the dead, to be born, reborn every morning in the east. Now out here is a city of the dead, a necropolis. Archaeologists have been discovering here the remains of men and women who actually built the pyramids. But for our purposes tonight, something more important may be happening over here, inside this stone tomb. About 10 feet down, 3 meters or so, is a stone sarcophagus. It is the oldest sealed sarcophagus ever found in Egypt. And tonight, with the help of archaeologists, we are going to attempt to open it and possibly glimpse for the very first time the remains of a 4,500-year-old man. It's tempting to believe that the ancient Egyptians were obsessed with death, but the reality is they were obsessed with life and the afterlife. Many of the men and women who were buried in this cemetery were in a race against time to build for their pharaoh a lavish tomb before he died and before the sun finally set in the night forever. The pharaoh Khufu spent his life on Earth preparing for his death, because unlike us, the ancient Egyptians believed that you could take it with you. Khufu knew that if his name was never forgotten, he would live forever. He'd be immortal. So he commissioned the biggest pyramid ever built. He also knew that eternity is a long time, and so had to take a lot with him to the afterlife. No one knows what Khufu took because his funeral treasure has never been found. Even more amazing, Khufu's body was never found either. We do know that Egyptian kings took incredible things to the afterlife, much of it gold, jewels of all kinds, furnishings, golden jars, gold-covered boxes, and much more. Khufu's funeral barge, which would have symbolically crossed the Nile from the land of the living to the land of the dead, would have been loaded with his treasure and with his body. He'd need both to live forever, and they were soon to be placed in the greatest tomb ever built. But where are they now? That may be the biggest mystery of all about the Great Pyramid. Is there a chance that his mummy and treasure could still be somewhere inside?
Well, here it is, the Great Pyramid of Khufu. I've now made my way about 1/4 of a mile from where you last saw me. And as the camera zooms in, you can probably just about see me here on the side of the pyramid. I'm making my way up the outside of it to the entrance. And standing here, I've got to say, it really is just awesome. After you confront Khufu's pyramid, you just can't help but wonder where his body and his treasure might be. You know, those are just a few of the mysteries here. And the team that we're going to meet are working on one of the most baffling. This is the entrance to the Great Pyramid. It's not the original one. That was blocked off after they buried the pharaoh. Now, this tunnel was cut through the stone about 1,000 years ago, and eventually it leads to what's believed to be Khufu's burial chamber. But to reach the chamber where our team are busy working, I'm going to have to make my way through a series of tunnels and shafts right through the very heart of the pyramid. I'm just about reaching the first one. I'm going to make it up these steep stone steps to where the team is working on solving the mystery of the secret shaft.
This mystery was first explored in 1992 when a German robot designed by Rudolf Gantenbrink probed the 8-inch square passageway with a camera. About 200 feet up into the shaft, the German team was stunned by what they saw. The shaft was blocked. The stone didn't look like a cave-in. It seemed to be custom cut to block the shaft. But why? Were the Egyptians trying to protect something? Could it lead somewhere? And what were those things that looked like handles? Could this be a door? Fascinated by this mysterious shaft and stone, Dr. Zahi Hawass, head of Antiquities for Egypt and a National Geographic Explorer in residence, had a dream of looking past it.
I've been waiting for this all my life.
With a grant from the National Geographic Society, a custom-built pyramid rover was commissioned just for the job. It's an ingenious device that can carry a range of tools and cameras. The electric motor drives 2 sets of treads, top and bottom, for added traction. It can also expand and contract depending on the height of the shaft. For weeks, the team has been exploring the shaft with the high-tech robot. It's well armed for the job, but it won't be easy. The stone's 200 feet up an extremely steep shaft, and getting there is only part of the battle.
A battle indeed. Well, that's the first part of the journey done. I'm a bit out of breath. I've just made it 120 feet up these steep steps here. But, you know, it was worth it because I'm now right inside the heart of the Great Pyramid. I'm standing in what's known as the Grand Gallery. You can see this impressive high stone ceiling here, and the staircases on either side of that gallery lead to the place where they found Khufu's sarcophagus. It's what's known as the king's burial chamber. But I'm not going in there. I'm going to head down this tunnel you can see behind me to what's called the Queen's Chamber. Now, it's called the Queen's Chamber, but Khufu's queen was never actually buried here, so we don't really know what it's for. That's just one of the mysteries that we're hoping to solve tonight. I'm about 50 feet away from the chamber, but I'm already 300 feet inside this massive stone structure. You know, there's about 5 million tons of stone surrounding me, completely surrounded by stone, as you can see. Now, we've got to stagger carefully through this tunnel, me and the cameraman, and when we get to the end, we're going to find a team of archaeologists and scientists who are waiting until we arrive to launch that specially designed, custom-built robot rover up the southern shaft of the chamber. Before we meet them, though, I want to introduce you to a very important man. He's the guy who runs this place, the director of the pyramids, and in fact, Egypt's leading archaeologist,
Laura.
Dr. Zahi
Good
Hawass.
to see
How
you.
great to see you.
Welcome to my beautiful country, Egypt, and
Thank
the
you very
pyramids.
much. It's wonderful. A bit of a struggle getting here, but
I
worth
know.
it, of course. We're inside the Queen's Chamber, and I want to go straight over here to
Just,
where our roboteers.
I would like you to see that this is the robot.
This is very impressive. This is the business end of solving a mystery,
This is
isn't it?
what's going to make the adventure tonight. But look, that is the camera that's going through the door. And it will take the photograph to see what's behind the door that will capture the hearts of everyone.
We all can't wait for that. So we're going to set this on its way now?
And it will walk within that small door. And that's the reason that we are sending the robot, not you, Laura.
Now, a lot of design has gone into this robot, I know. We'll be learning a little bit more about that later on. It's got to fit inside this, 7 or 8 square inches there of a tunnel. Tell us what's going to happen as the robot makes its way up the shaft.
What's going to happen, the robot will reveal the mystery. And it will walk within that shaft, and it will show to us for the first time the interior of the pyramid. And it will reveal the mystery that we are going to reveal tonight to everyone.
I mean, revealing mysteries is obviously just, it's a fun exercise anyway, but this is a serious scientific investigation, isn't
Yes,
it?
the first time actually that you have a high-tech, the robot, working with us, archaeology.
It's sort of 21st century technology figuring out
4,500 years ago, the most
Centuries of
important
history.
monument in the world.
It's incredible.
Yes.
One question I have to ask you, Zahi, because
Okay.
people at home are going to wonder, has anyone had a peek?
No, but I have some ideas. We'll talk about it tonight.
We'll talk
but
about
I don't
that.
think that anyone really can find out exactly what is behind this door.
Well, right now we're going to hand over to Jay Schadler, who's about to go into the overseer's tomb.
This causeway leads up to the oldest stone sarcophagus still sealed ever in Egypt. We're going to be opening it later in the show, but first imagine this for a second. 4,500 years ago, the mourners are carrying that stone coffin up this causeway. The fact that it is a causeway, that there's a runway here, that it's made of stone, coupled with the fact that it really lies in the shadow of the Great Pyramid, suggests that the man inside this tomb was an important person. The hieroglyphs tell us his name, Nesu Wessert, also his title, overseer of this administrative district. Now let's bring our cameras inside here. This is the antechamber, and 3 burial pits inside, but the most important for us tonight is this one right here. And if you look past my shoulder down the ladder, you can see just the edge of the sealed sarcophagus. Maybe our camera from down below can give you the whole shot. The fact that it has not yet been broken, there's been no plundering, raises the likelihood that we may find a mummy or a skeleton or artifacts. But even if it's just the dust of 4,000 years, the discoveries taking place on this site are finally beginning to give us the answers to the question of who built the pyramids. About 12 years ago, Dr. Zahi Hawass was wrestling with a tough problem. While there are hundreds of tombs here near the pyramids, tombs of queens, of princes and princesses, of nobles and high-ranking officials, Dr. Hawass could not find a single tomb of the people who actually built the place. Zahi knew that if he could find the builders, he could make them talk, and that these dead men could tell him tales about who they were and how they built the pyramids.
it was my dream to find any evidence of the people who built the pyramids.
Then, in 1990, in a strange twist, a tourist helped turn the dream into reality.
The discovery happened completely by accident. I was sitting at my office. It was in August. It was hot. The chief of the guard came and said, "Sir, a lady was riding a horse and the leg of the horse fell in a hole." I came here, I looked at the accident, I found a mud brick wall. I thought that this is a major discovery. This is really the first tomb that we found. It's beautifully vaulted, it was covered with plaster. When I looked here, I could see that the name is written hieroglyphic, Petah Shep Su. I looked at the other side, I could see a niche for the people to bring offering during the feast to give it to this man.
Next to the man's name appeared a key title, Acquaintance of the King.
This is the beginning of this major story.
Zahi knew he had to keep digging because the title and other tomb details hinted that the man was a worker, and where there was one, he knew he'd find more. Since then, they've found over 1,000 new graves, each one belonging to a pyramid builder. Most were simple, small mounds made of mud, brick, and stone, some shaped like small pyramids. Higher up the hill, they found bigger tombs. These were the graves of the overseers, the foremen on the job. This was a huge find. The overseers' tombs were loaded with information, not only the names, but most important, the titles of the dead men. Now, Dr. Hawass could finally create a flowchart for one of the most incredible construction jobs ever. Fascinating titles began to appear. The overseer of the workmen who dragged the stones, the overseer of the west side of the pyramid. Each new title revealed a new detail of how the Egyptians had organized themselves.
In this place, every day for us is very exciting. When you discover a tomb and there is hieroglyphic inscription, it's telling us that this man was in charge of the workmen. You find someone who's the overseer of the craftsmen, the man behind the officials, the man who's in charge of the harbor. All these titles are really unique. That's why every tomb here has a place on my heart.
These overseers didn't just leave behind their titles. They left a lot of beer. Hundreds of beer jars left to quench the buried man's thirst in the afterlife proved that even drinking beer would stretch into eternity. And so it worked. The diggers were also finding tools in the workers' tombs.
This is the kind of tools that an artist will use in carving the face of a statue to make it smooth and make the chest of the statue or the legs of the statue. And if you touch it, you can feel the hand of the workman who actually used it since 4,000 years ago.
Statues of princes and nobles and other tomb treasures are kept in the storeroom at Giza, a place where television cameras have never filmed before. But for Zahi, the most amazing things in here are the statues that show what the workers really looked like.
This statue here is a very important statue for me because this is the first statue that we found in our excavation. A lady grinding grain because she's working to make food and bread for the workmen who are working very hard in building the pyramid. What's important is that if you look at the faces of each one here, each person can tell us the story of the great Egyptians who built the pyramids.
The dead have been talking, and Zahi has learned remarkable things about them. But these workers had even more secrets to reveal, secrets hidden in their bones. Secrets in the bones. They have more to tell us coming up tonight, but right now I'm going to climb down for the very first time into the burial chamber, about 10-15 feet down, where Hamid is. Hello, Hamid.
Hello.
Beginning now to to brush away some of the debris, and we'll start chipping away at the mortar around the sarcophagus. This evening, later in our broadcast, archaeologists are going to pry it open, and we will lift the lid on a 4,500-year-old mystery, so stay with us.
Hello and welcome back here inside the Queen's Chamber. Now we are glued to these live pictures that our robot rover is sending back to us. We can see those here. This is what's happening right now. But we saw something really interesting a minute ago, didn't we, Zahid?
Yes, that's really, Laura, the signature, the fingerprints of the workmen, the pyramid builders, the Egyptians.
Now we're talking about the red marks that we should be able to see now.
That's it. We can see
those red marks.
This is the signature of the workmen.
So 4,500 years ago, somebody left their mark.
And we do see lots of marks like this all over the pyramids, outside and inside.
They're all clues to the past, aren't they?
Of course.
But you know, one of the biggest sources to all of these clues to the past is over at the Workers' Cemetery, where we're hooking up with Jay Schadler.
The pace is quickening here. You can hear Hamid, I think, there you go, chipping away at the mortar on the lid of the sarcophagus. We still, of course, have no idea what's inside, but many of the artifacts that we found in these tombs can give us ideas and sense for the detail of the lives of the people who lived here. For example, look over here. These fragments were found in this very tomb. These are fragments of beer jars and containers that held bread and beer. It's an interesting start to an afterlife, I guess. It's important for us to remember as we go through this evening that although we're focusing on the tombs and we're focusing on the Workers' Cemetery, already archaeologist Mark Lehner has made some remarkable discoveries on this very site just down the hill.
Another archaeological gold mine sits just below the tombs of the workers. Here, Egyptologist Mark Lehner has hit pay dirt. But it was not easy to find. Dr. Lehner started mapping the entire pyramid plateau in the 1980s. Then Mark, like his colleague Zahi Hawass, was vexed by a problem. Where were the builders? He had found the quarries where they had cut the stone for the pyramids, but where did they live? If he could find them, or any trace of their lives, he'd find a treasure trove of information about how the pyramids were built. Somewhere in the shadow of the pyramids, Mark knew a great city was hiding, the lost city of the pyramids.
When we first started excavating, we didn't know quite what to expect. We had many pyramids and tombs, but we didn't know how the people lived. So when you gather people together in tens of thousands for building a pyramid, what imprint does it leave?
Less than a mile from the Great Pyramid, at the edge of a Cairo suburb, he found that imprint.
In one of our first excavation seasons, a backhoe, a machine, dug a hole through the site and narrowly missed 3 large vats of pottery. These pottery vats first appeared above a surface of black, consistent ash. So consistent, we called it black velvet. We knew we must be on to an ancient bakery, because of tomb scenes, where they show themselves making bread in large pots just like those that filled the southern end of this bakery. But nobody had actually seen them so huge. They're conical inside, and we knew that they must have formed the bread loaves that we see them carrying for the offering scenes in the tombs. We had seen the tomb scenes, but we had never found a bakery where they actually did this.
Excited by the find, they expanded the site, and it just kept growing. The remains of one wall led to another and another, in a growing grid of mud brick buildings and orderly streets. In an archaeological heartbeat, they had uncovered a site that stretched over more than 6 football fields. Not only was it one of the largest dig sites ever cleared in Egypt, it was the weirdest. Archaeologists had never found a town like this before, anywhere.
These great streets separating long rows of galleries is not what we expected. It didn't look like housing. It didn't look like a campsite. We'd never seen anything quite like it.
Mark became even more intrigued when the team kept finding the same thing over and over, bakery after bakery. This was not evidence of some bizarre bread-worshipping cult. Lehner had discovered a key to the Egyptian success.
Finding it replicated on the scale of hundreds of bakeries basically gave us an insight into how the pyramid was made. In a very early period of Egyptian history, they didn't have Wonder Bread factories. They just took the way they did things in their homes, in their houses, and they repeated it many, many, many times. This was baking of an industrial scale, not some household kitchen.
Through the bakeries, we could now glimpse into the world of the pyramid builders, a place where the massive loaves were the staple food. The bakeries provided a model for understanding the whole complex pyramid project. Hundreds of bakeries for thousands of workers who were lifting millions of stones for their pharaoh's pyramid.
Welcome back here inside the Queen's Chamber, deep in the heart of the Great Pyramid. Now, Zahi, as we've said, you are the expert. The question on everybody's minds has got to be, what do you think is behind that stone door?
Laura, listen, we are sure now that this door is about 3.5 inches thick. Wow. Therefore, it's a door with 2 copper handles for the rope to pull that door. That means there is something should be behind it.
And what though? What do you think it might be?
I will tell you, if we will be optimistic and think the treasures of Khufu could be hidden here, and even we are not optimistic and see a small corridor or a hollow or something behind it, I believe it's a great discovery, because something inside the Great Pyramid to be seen for the first time, it's important for everyone to see that.
So anything is going to be something.
Anything going to be important.
I know you have to leave us now.
I have to leave you. I know that I will break your heart.
I know.
Don't cry, but don't do any tricks with me.
I'll try not to pee.
Wait until I come. Bye-bye.
Okay. Well, Dr. Hawass will be back here with us in the Queen's Chamber when the camera gets closer to the door and we're closer to solving the mystery. Something we do know, though, is that the pyramids were built very early in Egyptian history, at a time when they didn't have the wheel, they didn't even have pulleys to lift the incredibly heavy stones into place. But what's really amazing was the speed with which the ancient Egyptians created these incredible structures.
The Great Pyramids are such spectacular structures that it's hard to believe they were invented and perfected in less than a century. Before there were pyramids, early Egyptian kings were buried in the ground beneath simple mud brick piles called mastabas. That changed around 2600 BC when an architectural tidal wave hit. Then a genius named Imhotep invented a new way to glorify the king, what you might call the original Stairway to Heaven. Built for an Egyptian king named Zoser, this stepped monument is one of the most extraordinary buildings on the planet. It's the world's very first pyramid. Today, Dr. Hawass has a crucial mission at the stepped pyramid. He's going deep below it to check on the condition of several treasures, in particular a magic carving of the king that's feared damaged. He's dropped down into a maze. The architect not only built a massive pyramid for King Zoser, he also built him a sprawling underground palace for eternity. No one's been in these chambers for more than 30 years. Because they're extremely dangerous, some parts have collapsed. They were closed off 3 decades ago. Today, Zahi will become the only living archaeologist to visit Zoser's eternal home. Spread over 3.5 miles of tunnels and rooms, shafts and galleries, the palace was filled with jars and offerings, everything the king would need for the afterlife. And some of it is still here.
This is a beer jar. It's for the storage of beer. And this is baskets. It's made of papyrus. Can you imagine now that you are touching this basket? Then maybe Zoser himself put his finger on that. I have to say it's dangerous. The stones from the top can fall down. We can be buried here all our life. No one will know anything about us.
At its heart, at the base of a huge soaring shaft, Zahi reaches King Zoser's burial chamber.
Amazing, you know, people who talks about the Great Pyramid of Khufu, they do not know that before Khufu, the Egyptians were building an amazing structure like this. This is the most beautiful place on earth.
In the center, partially hidden under an old collapse, he finds the king's granite sarcophagus.
It's very heavy. I think it's about more than 20 tons weight with the lid. This is the resting place for this great king.
But Zoser's body isn't inside. In fact, his body has never been found. Zahi continues his exploration, and at the end of a small corridor, he finds what he's looking for. A powerful image of the king carved onto a magic door. It's through this door that Zoser would step into the afterlife.
It's amazing.
For Zahi, this is an emotional moment, for this was never meant to be seen by the living.
Today it's a very important moment in my life. This is wonderful.
Zahi can return to the 21st century in the realm of the living, satisfied that the treasures are safe. Perhaps more than anyone, Zahi understands just how valuable the stepped pyramid is. Its invention was like a bolt of lightning for the ancient Egyptians, powering a 100-year pyramid building boom. During that time, Khufu's father, the great pharaoh Snefru, solved a prickly problem, something that's important for tonight's show. He figured out how to build chambers and shafts inside a solid stone pyramid. Mark Lehner, one of the world's foremost pyramid experts, has come to Snefru's first pyramid to reveal how the problem was solved. Centuries before the Romans perfected the arch, how did the Egyptians prevent the massive weight of the pyramid above from crushing the king's burial chamber below?
In order to build a chamber up in the pyramid without the weight of the pyramid crushing the chamber, they corbelled the side walls. That is, they brought every course of masonry in a few inches more than the one below it, until the chamber closed on itself. And that way, the weight of the pyramid wasn't crushing down onto the burial of the king.
Because of this major innovation, Snefru's body could be placed higher in the pyramid, closer to the stars via a stairway to heaven and the eternal afterlife. While they figured out how to move the king's body up into the pyramid, the sides of Snefru's first pyramid collapsed. The builders still hadn't worked out how to build a smooth-sided pyramid that wouldn't fall down. So Snefru started in on another. This one is called the Bent Pyramid because of its slightly twisted climb towards the sky. Today, Zahi's inspectors are visiting for an annual check. Inside, they see plenty of evidence that Snefru's builders had mastered the art of corbelling. This chamber has a soaring vault, and it was just an anteroom to the burial chamber. To reach it, the inspectors first have a long climb to the top, and then they crawl through a series of small tunnels. Snefru, determined that his body would be left in peace, made his burial chamber as inaccessible as possible. But even with this remarkable tomb, now home to thousands of bats, Snefru still wasn't happy. No body, in fact not even his sarcophagus, was found inside. No one knows why Snefru wasn't satisfied with this pyramid. Maybe it was the weird shape. If it had continued at its original angle, this would have been the largest pyramid ever built. But some scientists think the sides were too steep and that it too would have collapsed. Undaunted, Snefru started on yet another pyramid, his third in less than 30 years. This time he settled on a smaller version, but with perfectly smooth sides. Called the Red Pyramid, it set the stage for the ultimate experiment in pyramid building. It was Snefru's son Khufu who would build the greatest of all pyramids. When Khufu became pharaoh, he immediately began to plan for his own death, incorporating each of his father's innovations. Khufu would have marked the spot for his tomb through an elaborate foundation ceremony. Then, construction could begin on what would become one of the 7 wonders of the world.
For a long time, our fascination with the royal mysteries inside the Great Pyramid overshadowed the lives and the remarkable people who actually built it. But this is the very place where many of those people were buried. Dr. Hawass in particular has been interested in exploring the mysteries of this place and those lives. When he arrives, and he's on his way now, he'll be here very shortly, he will be overseeing the opening of what may be the sarcophagus of Nesu Wessert, our 4,500-year-old man. Because of his high-ranking position as an overseer at the pyramids, Nesu Wessert could well have known precisely how they were built, a question that has been hanging unanswered for thousands of years.
As Khufu's new pyramid rose from the ground, the builders were creating a labyrinth inside. Construction became as complex as 3-dimensional chess. As each layer of stone was placed atop the other, gaps had to be left in the right place for every shaft and every chamber. At any stage of construction, looking down on the pyramid would reveal just how complicated this job was. Some of these interior spaces are huge. The Great Gallery, a massive slope shaft that leads to Khufu's burial chamber, is nearly 30 feet high and over 140 feet long. At the entrance to the king's burial chamber, the pyramid workers built an ingenious device to stop any tomb robbers.
After they put the mummy of the king inside the sarcophagus, the workmen and the priestess and the son of the king will push this slab to close the entrance of the burial chamber, and the king will be buried safely for the afterlife.
The blocks were lifted long ago, probably by tomb robbers. On the other side is the inner sanctum, the burial chamber. Curiously, just like in the Queen's chamber, there are 2 small shafts here. They may be connected to Khufu's spirit, which would have been entombed in the giant sarcophagus. But his body has never been found, and neither has his treasure chamber. The idea of undiscovered chambers has captivated the public for centuries. But even many of the known shafts and chambers are still a mystery, like the subterranean chamber underneath the pyramid. It sits almost 100 feet below the surface of the plateau and can only be reached by a steep shaft. Cut out of bedrock, it would have been huge, more than 40 feet long with 16-foot ceilings. But it was never finished. What was it for? Was this going to be the burial chamber, only to be abandoned for one higher in the pyramid? And what about the Queen's chamber itself? Despite the name, it wasn't for Khufu's queen. She has her own pyramid just outside.
Well, the shaft that our team is investigating tonight begins right here in the Queen's chamber where I'm standing now. But since this wasn't for the Queen, as we've already heard, then who or what was it for? Well, one of the theories has it that it might have been for the soul of the king. This theory says that a statue of Khufu would have stood right here in this niche where I'm standing now. Now, the Egyptians believed that a statue or an image of somebody took on their spirit when that person died. Now, if there was a statue, it's probable that the looters would have stolen it. If you look closely behind me, you can see where looters tried to cut a tunnel through the stone here, probably trying to reach the place they thought they would find Khufu's treasure, but there was no secret space there. Tonight, our team may just find a new space in the pyramid, if that's what lies beyond the stone door. So don't go away. And there it is, the Great Pyramid. We are actually inside it, of course, about halfway up in a place called the Queen's Chamber. Now, the Pyramid rover is now about 3/4 of the way up the secret shaft. That's about 180 feet.
The Pyramid rover is cleverly divided into two parts. The front looks like a miniature tank. This is the powerhouse. It's designed to crawl up the steep 40-degree shaft, dragging its brains behind it in a kind of black box jammed with electronics. The rover has 5 tiny digital cameras for steering and for sending back detailed pictures of the shaft and stone. Team leader Mike Bassett hasn't quite mastered driving via remote control.
It's a matter of going to the tractor-trailer school for a couple days.
But he quickly gets the hang of it and cruises up the shaft at a dizzying 5 feet per minute. Finally, after traveling nearly 180 feet, at last they could see the blocking stone.
That's the door. Look, you can see the tabs. Look at that.
But reaching it was going to be difficult. Right in front of the robot was a step, only 2 inches high, but to a 6-inch rover, that's a major climb.
So, we're still getting a lot of slip. It's a very high step. It's an uneven step. It's at an odd angle. It's very difficult for me to steer and get traction.
No matter what they did, the rover just couldn't get over. After 2 days, multiple adjustments and several tries, they finally made it.
Okay. All right. We're there. All right. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so.
But then something went wrong.
Okay, we're coming down.
The robot fell nearly 180 feet. The project looked like it was over. But amazingly, the rover survived almost intact, and they found the cause of the failure. A metal pin snapped, the tracks released their grip on the walls, and the robot plunged. The next day, with a new pin and a little adjustment, the rover climbed over the step without a hitch. Minutes later, Zahi gets his first good look at the stone with its intriguing copper handles.
Look at how smooth the stone is. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's very smooth.
That's a beautiful picture.
These are the most detailed images ever, and already they've been able to make a tantalizing discovery.
So from this chip at the bottom corner, you can see the shadows, and you can see very clearly that this stone is sitting in a vertical groove in the side wall. And that's very good news, because that is what you would do if this were actually a door that was slid into the place from above.
Then, remote sensing expert Meg Waters notices a curious substance in front of the stone.
What do you think it is?
I think it may be mortar. I think it's actually really
It's
key.
exactly the
It's
same.
intentional.
The mortar that exists underneath that slab, it shows that this is a space. I'm sure that this is a movable stone, and they pushed it there.
I see.
It may have been movable when they set it, but mortar would have locked it in place. That may mean the only way to see past the stone is to drill a tiny peephole for a camera. To prepare for that, the team will have to modify the robot back in Boston. Learning new details about the stone has only whetted everyone's appetite to see behind it.
Well, the team returned to the Great Pyramid just 2 weeks ago with a new robot, and they called it Pyramid Rover 2.0.
One of the most promising innovations was a ramp to get over the step. It won't stay in the shaft for eternity. It'll be easily retrieved at the end of the investigation.
Let's do it.
The team wanted to find out as much as possible about the stone. Was it a door? Did it move? Or was it a big solid block? Most of all, they wanted to see past it, but only if they could minimize the damage to the stone. They'd already tried to look through every existing seam and crack, like the one in the corner, but none opened to the other side. On this trip, the robot was carrying a device to measure the thickness of the stone.
Okay.
To get an accurate reading, the rover had to push with as much as 40 pounds of force.
Firing. Adjust only up. Resetting.
So while it was reading the thickness, it was also seeing if the stone would move.
No signal.
But it didn't budge.
Setting.
Then, some amazing news. The measuring device indicated that the stone was only about 3 inches thick, so maybe drilling a small peephole in the stone was now an option. But Zahi was unsure.
What's important for me is the safety of the pyramid. If it's not going to be safe, I will never agree at all.
So the team built a mock-up of the shaft and stone and started test drilling. In less than 25 seconds, the robot had put a clean hole straight through the stone, just big enough for a tiny camera and light to fit through it. Still wary, the team tried making holes in different kinds of stone. Some weathered like the pyramid stone, some in even worse condition. Every hole was clean with no chips or fractures. Finally, Dr. Hawass decided to go ahead. Armed with a drill, the robot moved up the shaft for its most important mission so far. It was 6 a.m. and the end of a 24-hour shift. Everyone was there to watch this historic moment. They knew they had to get it right. A perfect hole and no damage to the stone.
Well, we've just heard about that ramp. Now let's see if the robot can make it over it and see if it works. Let's have a look. The robot, as you can see, is just approaching that ramp. Greg is one of our roboteers. How do you think it's doing?
It seems to be doing well. There's actually a significant amount of effort that went into the design of the ramp, including evaluating video data from previous missions and building a model of that particular step.
Well, hard work, and it seems to have worked. The robot's made it over the ramp, so there's only one thing left to do now, and that's put the camera through and see what's on the other side. We're not quite there yet, about 10 feet to go, so stay with us.
Welcome back to the show. I'm here at the Overseer's tomb, and Dr. Hawass, who is a very busy man, is just
Hello,
heading up
Jay.
the causeway. How are you?
How are you?
You've been busy tonight.
Very busy.
Do something for me here before we go inside the tomb. These hieroglyphics, just quickly tell me what they mean.
You know, the hieroglyphic here is telling us about beer bread for offering during the feasts, but the most important here is the title of this man. First of all, his name is Ni Su Wissert, and his title is Imira Hut At Bir, means the overseer of the administrative district. That means that this man was the mayor of the village of the pyramid builders.
This entire area around the pyramids.
This entire area, and he was in charge of them. And look at him.
Yep.
Standing, and behind him his wife. Touching him.
Who may also
with
be
love
in here?
and affection. Maybe.
Love and affection. That's the Egyptian way.
The Egyptian way of love, and that's how we built the
We're
pyramids.
going to head back in now, and
We'll go down
Dr.
now.
Hawass will head down for the first time and oversee the very final moments.
And you know, here we found a skeleton with a dog. And maybe this man is a friend of this mayor.
Dr. Hawass is going to start the chipping very soon now. We should mention the fact that we have no way of knowing, of course, once again, what is inside the coffin, a mummy or a skeleton or even dust, possibly. But what we do know is that when the ancient Egyptians were laid to rest, it was with the faith that they would live forever.
We also know the kinds of things they took with them. Take the overseer of carpenters, Inti Shedu, who was buried nearby in sight of the pyramid. And being buried so close to the king gave him a better shot at eternity. As an overseer, Inti Shedu could afford some funeral extras. He took several statues to the grave, each painted and carved in stone. His immortality depended on the statues which, when placed inside his tomb, would serve as his spiritual doubles. Statues, beer jars, and other artifacts have given us key details about the builders. But the most important details in Inti Shedu's tomb, like all the workers found in the cemetery, are in his bones. Inti Shedu and the other workers buried in the cemetery did achieve immortality in a way, thanks to modern Egyptian scientists. For Zahi, the revelations from their bones and tombs have helped rewrite history. Before he found them, he had been haunted by the writings of an ancient Greek historian who claimed the pyramids were built by an army of 100,000 slaves. But new discoveries by bone expert Dr. Azza Mohammed Sari al-Din is showing that the Greeks had it wrong. Dr. Azza is a kind of bone reader, and etched deep into the bones are the stories of the ancient workers. A slave army would have been mostly male, but that is not the case with these bones.
We found that the percentages of the males to the females was about 50%. And also we found some children.
Instead of slaves, Dr. Azza seemed to be finding the remains of some kind of workers' village, where entire families lived. And the bones tell another story about this place. Whether slave or free, many of the workers spent most of their days doing brutally hard work. X-rays of the ancient bones reveal severe wear. Many of the workers' joints had been ruined by extreme and repeated stress. And the idea of back-breaking work may have started in ancient Egypt, where there are plenty of damaged spines as evidence.
The spine is severely curved, and this is of course caused by compression of the vertebrae, especially these 2 or 3 vertebrae are wedge-shaped.
Building the pyramids without using wheels, pulleys, or winches meant the workers' bodies got punished. After all, this was no small feat. The Great Pyramid was the tallest building in the world until the 20th century. Workers would have to set a huge stone every 2 to 3 minutes, 7 days a week, for 3 decades to finish the pyramids by the time the king died. A lot of workers probably died in the process, and injuries were no doubt frequent. But a remarkable find suggests that many builders survived their injuries.
We have the example here of the fractured bone that is a part of the arm. And this bone, as we see, it is healed in a very good position.
This bone has healed so well, indicated by the bulge, it must have been set by an expert. And it's only one example of many. But the biggest surprise of all is that they did more than mend bones. There's evidence that they could perform surgery when they had to. When the weight of a crushing stone virtually destroyed a worker's lower arm, there was only one medical solution: amputation.
These are the 2 bones of the arm. This is the normal position, and they are amputated about this level, about 1/3 of the arm.
Even more amazing, the man survived it.
And for this individual, we have also the upper arm, and we can see which is this part of the bone, and you can notice that is curved because this individual were having this amputation at this level, so he used to use his hand like this, and this causes the curvature in the bone as we see here, and this means that this person lives for many years after this amputation.
No one ever thought such surgery was survivable at the time when the pyramids were built. The doctors were not only able to stop the bleeding, they somehow stopped the infection too, possibly by cauterizing the wound with searing hot metal. Would slaves have been cared for so well? Not likely. Their treatment seems to show just how valuable the workers were, and just how important this royal building project was to ancient Egypt.
Back inside the Queen's chamber, the hush in here just is a sign of the excitement and the tension. We're just approaching the door. Don't go away.
Welcome back to the Overseer's tomb, the burial chamber. You can see, if the camera drops down here for a second, they've already chipped away underneath the lid, all through here on 2 sides. And Dr. Hawass, tell me, there are fingerprints on the surface of the lid.
Jay, you can look here. I really can feel the finger of my ancestor, this workman who closed it, the workmen who are involved in building the pyramid.
That's the handprint of the man who closed the seal.
Comes to my heart.
That's the fingerprints of the man who closed the seal. You're going to be the one who opens it tonight.
We'll open it tonight.
All right. All right. The rest of the mortar will take just a few seconds, I assume?
Yes, we'll start now. I'm finishing the whole thing, as a matter of fact.
Right. We, of course, do not know exactly who the man is inside this tomb. But we do know that he was not a royal advisor.
More likely, Nesset Wessert, who might have worn a necklace to mark his rank, may have worked as a kind of quartermaster, managing all of the supplies, but especially the food for the massive workforce. He may have been a kind of city manager for the huge lost city that Mark Lehner has found. And it is Nesset Wessert who probably knows the answers to every new riddle Lehner confronts.
As we peeled back the sand from the desert, we did find the footprint of a city of the pyramids. We found a city, but it wasn't where people were living. It was where they were working.
And they weren't just baking bread. They were preparing food on a scale that would put an army field kitchen to shame.
In our excavations of the ruins of this city of the pyramids, we find thousands and thousands of pieces of cattle bone. In fact, along Main Street of the city, we find those kinds of bones that would have been left behind in butchering, jaw bones and teeth and knuckle bones. This made us wonder, was a large part of the street and the city given over to the slaughter of cattle and the preparation of meat?
Even more ancient food secrets were hiding in the ruins of the city. To find them, Lehner and his team pushed the search deeper into the dirt. Every millimeter of sand taken from the site is sifted and cataloged. Hundreds of thousands of pottery shards, tiny fragments of charcoal, even seeds. Everything is analyzed and recorded in minute detail. The relentless work finally pays off with another revelation. It seems that these workers thrived on more than just bread and meat.
Looks like the spine of a little fish.
It's one of millions of tiny fish bones littering the site. So in addition to butchering meat, the workers of the lost city were bringing thousands of fish from the Nile and salting and drying it on an industrial scale. These weren't slave rations. These workers were being fed like Olympic athletes.
We have enough cattle bone to feed thousands and thousands of people if they ate meat every day over the better part of a century. In fact, just about the time it would have taken to build the 3 giant pyramids of Giza.
Now Mark had a good idea about what they ate. But where was all this feasting taking place? Then, near the bakeries, Mark finds the remains of a unique building with a strange arrangement of troughs and benches running its length.
We began to find underneath these benches limestone column bases, like this one. And from holes in the bench just above the base, we realized that slender wooden columns rose every 5 Egyptian cubits. We were, in fact, in Egypt's oldest columned hall.
On his hands and knees in that hall, Mark finds some bony clues.
As we excavated these troughs and benches and looked really close, we found little tiny fish bone embedded throughout it. We found loads of fish bone, like dried Christmas tree needles. How nice that another little set of fish bone should come up.
Were these just table scraps and crumbs from the world's first and oldest cafeteria? Maybe this was the place where groups of workers came to eat each morning before a strenuous day's work. Lehner was getting a much better idea of how they worked by seeing how they lived. But the pyramids were not built on fish, meat, and bread alone. These workers needed to sleep. We know where they were buried. But where would thousands of workers have laid down after toiling all day on behalf of their pharaoh? The man-god who would be laid to rest inside his pyramid.
We are back in the burial chamber. Dr. Hawass and Hamid have gone all the way around, cleared all the mortar away, and we're now to the very moment where we're going to hopefully break the seal. But now I have a question for you before we do that, about the proverbial myth about the mummy's curse. No scientific evidence, but some...
But there is some evidence. Near us here, there is an inscription say, if you touch the tomb of this person, you will be eaten by crocodile, a hippo, and a lion. But don't worry, because what I'm going to do now, just move this little bit.
But there's also, isn't there also an issue there of toxins, possibly?
Yeah, but, you know, germs here.
The seal's been broken. There's the seal's been broken.
When I open this little bit, Jay,
yes,
then the germs, look, the germs will go.
Yes.
And nothing will happen to me. But maybe something will happen to you. Because the sharp is just in your
He's a
face.
very encouraging fellow, isn't he? But, ladies and gentlemen, what we've just seen here now is the seal on the coffin has been broken. This allows whatever 4,500-year-old air that is in there to release for a little while. And then we're off for the opening in a few minutes.
We'll open it and you will watch the most exciting.
This kind of painstaking archaeology was not always performed. In fact, back in the 19th century, explorers were often ready with the dynamite when they went after treasures.
Though Zahi may have preferred a more subtle technique, it was a nearly insane blasting campaign in the 1800s that led to one of the most amazing discoveries ever made in the Great Pyramid. Then, a British colonel named Howard Vyse used dynamite in a futile hunt for treasure within the Great Pyramid. Instead, he discovered several secret rooms stacked one over the other above the king's burial room. There are 5, and they're called relieving chambers, built to spread the enormous load bearing down on the king's tomb below. In fact, it's only through the channel which Vyse blasted that Dr. Hawass can climb to these secret rooms. There is treasure here, but it's hard to find. Over the last 2 centuries, hundreds of visitors have scrawled their names all over the walls. But mixed among this graffiti, Egyptologists made a sensational find: hieroglyphic graffiti from the people who actually built the pyramid. The graffiti reveals that the pyramids were built by work gangs.
Each gang consists of 1,000 workmen, and they divide the gangs to small units. They call them file. A file is a Greek word, means a tribe. Each tribe consists of 200 workmen.
The files were further divided into smaller gangs, and each boasted a name: Great One, Green One, Endurance, even one called Perfection. This could mean that the gangs competed against each other, and that they had a kind of team spirit. That's a critical detail in understanding the speed with which they built the pyramids. But Egyptologists were even more fascinated with graffiti found in the very top relieving chamber.
This is the name. The first time that you can see the name of Khufu written inside the pyramid, Khufu, inside a cartouche. And after that we have the word Apiru, and Simsu, mean the gang. And this is the name of the gang who built the pyramids, called Friends of Khufu.
Amazingly, this is the only known place in the whole pyramid with Khufu's name. This is his cartouche: a sun, a bird, a slug, and another bird. By signing their work in this holy place, the gang that set this stone upped their chances for immortality. Dividing the workers into gangs revealed how the pyramid planners organized their men. It may give Mark Lehner clues to help him solve his latest problem. In addition to the bakeries, butcheries, and fish drying stalls, the streets of the pyramid town are lined with strange big buildings featuring long gallery-like rooms. The Egyptians did invent bowling, but these aren't bowling alleys.
So at first we thought, well, we don't know what this is. It's quite alien, and it doesn't fit our expectations at all.
Were these long rooms also for food production? What could the pyramid builders have been doing here? Then one morning, Mark had an idea. These galleries, more than 60 feet in length, could have been dormitories. Maybe this is where a whole crew of workers slept. If the long galleries were dormitories, could it be that this was where the Perfection Gang, or even a gang like the Friends of Khufu, slept? Maybe the gangs not only worked together, but like an army platoon, they shared a barracks too. This theory leaves another question for Mark. He thinks it only took about 25,000 workers to build the pyramids. There's room for about 2,000 in the dorms. So where did the rest of the workers sleep?
It's a good chance that the entire work site, the entire construction yard, was in fact a campsite. It's a very reasonable assumption that people were camped all over the quarry and on the pyramid itself during the time it was being built.
So maybe some of the hard laborers, the workforce that was probably brought in seasonally, lived closer to the pyramid and were cared for with good quality food by the people from the city. But overseers like Nesset Wessert, the man whose tomb will open shortly, and the skilled workers on the job were not campers. Where did they live? Mark was still missing key parts of his picture, but that was about to change. Toward the end of their digging season, Mark's team pushed the edges of the site further than ever before and uncovered a critical part of the puzzle.
It was only in the last few weeks when we moved this far east that we began to find these little chambers and these little houses.
At last, the city is beginning to make sense. Here in this corner are the houses for the more permanent pyramid workers and their families, the craftspeople, the overseers, the potters, weavers, and carpenters. Based on these new discoveries, both from Dr. Hawass and from his own site, Lehner is now able to create the most comprehensive picture of the Giza Plateau we've ever seen. The world's first industrial city, surrounded by houses for skilled craftsmen and their families, an extended campsite for seasonal workers, and an incredible building project. It is a portrait of ancient Egyptian power on the rise.
And you couldn't ask for a more spectacular symbol of that power than this incredible structure, which originally was finished with brilliant white stone. We're inside the Queen's chamber and we're about to find out what's on the other side of the stone. Don't go away.
Welcome back to the show. If there's ever been a moment of revelation, this is it. 4,500 years ago. We're ready, Zahid.
Ready now? Yes.
The lid is going to come off, hopefully. And we're going to do our best here to bring a camera in. There it goes. I think there is a skeleton.
God!
There is a skeleton, isn't there? Oh my God. Tell us what you see, Zahid.
I'm seeing this man is resting beautifully, and the skeleton is here. He looks to me that he's a man.
How can you tell?
I can see from looking at that part, we can know that this is Nesset Wessert. His skull is completely preserved.
It's this perfect. It looks like he's lying on his side.
Yeah, it's lying his side, and it's dated back to 4,500 years ago. I expected to see some pottery that he will use in the beyond, but you know, all the pottery has been found around here. We found beer jar and that he will drink in the afterlife, and we found bread molds and all this kind of old kingdom typical stuff.
Is there significance to the fact that he's on his side facing east?
Yeah, because he's looking at the rising sun. But the most important thing that I want people to learn from this shay, that these are the fingerprints of the workmen, the Egyptians who built the pyramids. This can shut the mouth of all these idiots who talks about lost civilization and all this kind of nonsense. This man, his existence, his skull. In that time in Dynasty 4, mummification was very rare.
Yeah, tell me about that, because this was 1,000 years before King Tutankhamun, right?
Yes, about 900 years before King Tut.
Mummification was not, it was still in an experimental stage.
You know, in my excavation here west of the Great Pyramid, I found a mummy, but that mummy was only a mask of a lady. We called her Mona Lisa. But look at this. The he wants to preserve his skeleton because he's an important man. He cannot leave the skeleton alone.
Do you see any artifacts, Zahi, at all? Any amulets?
You know, Jay, right now, I do not want to disturb this.
Right.
This is how archaeology we can be very careful in documentation. Up there is a photographer will come right away, take photographs. And number two, a man who's doing conservation will come to protect the skull. Number three, every piece of this carefully will be taken to the lab for X-ray. Then we found about his age, when did he die, any kind of diseases.
Any DNA analysis?
I do not believe DNA now is not really accurate with mummies and ancient bones at all. But the most important thing that we can know, the skull that we found outside, we have evidence that he died through a fight with someone.
Okay. This is obviously very cursory at this point. The skull seems to be completely intact.
Where is my brush?
There.
I can clean this beautiful face and tell this man to tell the world that the Egyptians were the builder of the pyramids. It's really a message from the suit wizard, and I'm glad that this man saved his body.
This is one of the principal points that you want to make, isn't it, Doctor? That the Egyptians were not the slave culture in any way.
This is very important. You know who existed as slaves? Cecil de Mille. Oh. Pyramids has to be built by love.
Is this what you expected it to be?
I did expect exactly that, but the skull, when I look at his face, I can really see him live in front of me. Right. And telling the world about the Egyptians, they were like us.
Now begins the hard archaeology in some ways, but one incredible discovery for tonight. I can't quite believe that we've got this one. More perhaps ahead over at the Queen's Chamber, so stay with us. We're back after the extraordinary revelation. We finally know what's in that tomb. Dr. Hawass, however, has had to head back to the Great Pyramid, where we hope that he will be seen past the stone door in the shaft in just a moment. But now, what about this 4,500-year-old man? If he managed the pyramid town, he would have done it from a palace or a real building. But where is it? Archaeologist Mark Lehner might have the answer. At the southern edge of his site, Lehner found the remains of two massive stone walls, separated by a space equal to a modern sidewalk. Stone was a rare find in the mud brick of the lost city. It was for something monumental, almost royal, like the pyramids themselves. And these walls were big, almost 3 feet thick. Whatever this building housed, or guarded, it had to be extremely valuable.
These two walls, just the corners poking out, suggested that everything we had found already was simply an adjunct to whatever this was.
In other words, this was the most important building on the whole site. But what was it? Was it the boundary wall of a royal building? Littered throughout the site, they find evidence that it was. Fragments from the king's seal, used for closing sacks of grain or jars of wine. As they continued to dig inside the stone walls, the story entered the final act.
In the last few days, we've been digging in this big, sunken, rectangular area that's been filled with all this stone, debris, and rubble that you see here. And as we've been moving the stony rubble, we're finding these curious semicircular features made out of mud. These were once round silos, it's certain now. And there were a whole series of them. We have 7, 8, maybe there were dozens, one right next to another. And these silos must have been used for storing grain.
But why would silos, something we take for granted, be so important? These silos, tucked within the imposing stone walls, embody the heart of not only the lost city of the pyramids, but the entire pyramid complex. 4,500 years ago, food was frequently scarce, and grain would have been like gold, carefully controlled and guarded. Grain was the engine that powered the project, the source of the staple food, bread. If there had been no bread, there would have been no pyramids. The grain silos inside the royal building is where Nesset Wessert may have spent many of his days. Checking the quantity of grain with his pharaoh might have been a routine duty. Ensuring that there was plenty of grain to feed the workers would have been his most important task, for plentiful grain was a guarantee that the king's pyramid would be completed before the king died.
Well, building it was a colossal challenge, as the pyramid was a sacred place, so it had to be built according to all their religious beliefs. That might help explain what these shafts were for. There are two similar shafts above us in the king's chamber. The difference with those is that they do go all the way to the outside of the pyramid. So why wouldn't these shafts here in the queen's chamber also reach to the outside? Zahi and remote sensing expert Meg Waters decided to climb the pyramid for another look.
The Great Pyramid rises some 450 feet above the ground, and climbing it reveals just how big the building blocks are. Zahi and Meg are working their way to the point where the tunnels from the shaft chamber should emerge, about halfway up.
We are near that shaft now.
Okay.
But the archaeologists here at Giza looked everywhere on the surface, on the south here, and they could not find any evidence at all of this shaft that has a hole outside.
Can you tell me what were the shafts for?
My theory that I believe that the south shaft functioned, it's a symbolic corridor for the soul of the king as the sun god Ra. Then symbolically in the mind of the Egyptian that the soul of the king will go through that shaft. The northern one, it's also a model corridor for the king as the god Horus to join the northern stars.
The role of the shafts must have been very important because building them was incredibly difficult. They weren't just drilled through the finished pyramid. As we've seen, they were carefully laid out as the pyramid went up, layer by layer. So why did the king need special shafts? Why couldn't his soul simply go down the grand gallery and out the regular exit? Egyptologist Rainer Stadelmann thinks the king refused to.
This was very, very important. We have it in the pyramid text that the king says, "My distaste is to descend into the earth. I, the king, ascend directly to the sky."
But if the king's spirit went directly from his burial chamber to the sky, why then go to all the trouble of building shafts for the queen's chamber, where the king was never even buried? The answer may be linked to magic. Mark Lehner thinks the queen's chamber was a dummy chamber, a sealed room inhabited only by the king's soul. But the soul would need to move out of the pyramid to the heavens, so wouldn't a stone door pose a problem?
A blocked passage would be no problem for a king's soul. It didn't have to be open for the king to ascend. The principal means of going into the other world in any normal Egyptian tomb was what we call a false door, a dummy door. When they make a simulated door out of stone, then it's magical, and then it can commune with the netherworld.
But if the blocking stone is a kind of magical false door, why does it appear to have handles?
These copper fittings are magical instruments which the king can take, or the soul of the king can take when it ascends. It uses them to open these blocks and pass through the stones to the sky.
Magic was essential to Egyptian rituals, and Khufu's burial chamber must have contained all sorts of papyrus scrolls with magical writings, prayers to help him on his way to the heavens. But what about behind the stone?
It might be possible that there is, let's say, a papyrus roll or something behind these stones. There's no place for much more.
The mystery of the secret shaft remains as tantalizing as ever.
We're back inside the Queen's chamber. This really is the moment of truth, isn't it, Zahi? What we've all been waiting for. The camera is now lined up against that 3/4 of an inch hole in the stone door. We are now going to follow its progress through the hole with that camera there, and we're going to find out if and what is behind that stone door. Let's have a look at what's happening. Let's see. Okay, the lights are on. You can see the camera making its steady progress towards the hole there. Now, Zahi, talk us through what's happening.
Just the camera is getting in the hole now, but I can't see anything.
Okay. Now, oh my goodness, look at that. We're hearing shrieks inside here. I've got to tell you, this team of archaeologists has been waiting for this moment for months and months. This is incredibly exciting. What are we seeing, Zahi?
We can see another sealed door.
Another sealed door?
Yeah.
And what are these markings on the door? There seems to be some black marks, or is that a crack?
Cracks. It's cracks.
Wow.
In another sealed door. And
oh my goodness.
It's another space, another sealed door, but it looks to me we have a discovery.
Another discovery. Now, can we see anything on the floor there? What's happening here? It looks like that, as you say, is a door, not a dead end, doesn't it?
It is some, look at this hole underneath.
Yes.
That's really is also,
just where you can see.
Looks to me that's sealing something. We are here in front of a discovery.
This is incredible.
And I am really happy that we got this. We found a space. We found another sealed chamber.
This is incredible. This is the first time a space has been found within the Great Pyramid within, what, 130 years?
I know, but Laura, this is very important. This is something I'm very proud that finally we revealed the first mystery of the Great Pyramid of Khufu.
The question is, what happens next?
Next, we'll study this. We'll find out how can we reveal more secrets of the pyramids. But this is very important, that what we are showing now, it shows the amazing, those people, the great Egyptians.
Do we have any idea what that door might be for? Why there would be two doors?
I do not know, but it seems there is something important is hidden here.
Obviously, the investigation is going to have to continue, and we'll be bringing you more information as National Geographic finds it out. But wow, we're actually going to have to say goodbye now from the Queen's chamber.
Laura, good luck. You did a good job.
Thank you. You too.
Congratulations.
We're handing back over to Jay. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Oh, what a night, huh? Already the work of recording and analyzing what was found here has begun at the site. And we should tell you that from the moment this project was conceived, everyone here at National Geographic has understood that we were involved in a kind of 21st century experiment, a blending of hard science and television. They can make strange bedfellows, and no one knows that better than us. After all, science demands patience. Television craves experience. Still, both are seeking a kind of revelation to reveal what is hidden beneath the surface of things. And to be honest, I suspect that no one's heart beats faster at the moment of discovery than the scientists. If we have managed tonight to give all of you at home a glimpse into that world, into that moment when the unknown becomes known, then we'll consider it a success. Tonight, we still stand on sacred ground, home to the world's first great civilization. Now for Laura and Dr. Hawass and everyone here at National Geographic, I'm Jay Schadler. Good night from the Giza Plateau and the Great Pyramids.